life is pretty hopeless for billions and billions of people around the world without Bitcoin. And with Bitcoin, a poor Uber driver or tour guide in Central Africa has the same property rights as a billionaire on the Upper East Side of New York City with an army of lawyers whose brother is the governor. And you can't say that about anything else. And you're not going to be able to hold out, shares of Apple stock as the moral equivalent for the next 100 years. I don't even think, look, I have been the CEO of a publicly traded company. I'm an officer of a publicly traded company. I can't promise you what the management of my company will be like in 100 years or 50 years. I don't know. So Bitcoin in that regard is special. What do I worry about? I don't really worry about anything. I mean, at this point, it's just a matter of who's winning and who's losing and how fast is this entire story going to play out. Then you go and you advocate Bitcoin to them. Like, you want to help your country? Let's take Turkey. Okay, well, Turkey's got a problem. Their currency is collapsing. And as the currency collapses, all the people of Turkey are being impoverished. They've lost 96% of their wealth against the dollar in 20 years. They have a $20 to $40 billion balance of payments problem every year. They have $50 billion of gold. You want to solve the problems of Turkey? What worries me? Well, if I was Turkish, this would worry me, right? Sell the $50 billion of gold, buy $50 billion worth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin will go up by a factor of 4 to 5. The Turkey central bank will have $250 billion of Bitcoin. Bitcoin will appreciate anywhere from 15 to 20% a year thereafter. They will end up with a $40 billion surplus from their Bitcoin position, offsetting a $20 to $40 billion deficit from their balance of trade problem. The Turkish lira will actually turn around and strengthen. Everybody in Turkey gets rich or gets richer. They stop getting poor. The country is saved. The currency is saved. The people are saved. They start an avalanche. What would I worry about? I worry about holding gold. That's, if you're asking me what do I fear, I don't fear anything if I actually have the superior asset. If I was a gold holder, I would fear that one person in Turkey would have the clarity, the conviction, and the courage to sell all the gold and buy Bitcoin. Because if that one person does that, then everybody else is going to start to copy them. The price of gold is going to crash from $1,900 an ounce down to $200 an ounce over time. Gold will approach its utility value. The monetary premium gets stripped off of it. Other nations will start to do the same thing. The nations that move first will have their currencies benefit, because instead of having your currency backed by gold, your currency be backed by Bitcoin. Your nation is backed by Bitcoin. Your nation goes on the Bitcoin standard. What happened to the African nations that kept the glass bead standard when the Europeans showed up on the gold standard? Right? The Europeans basically printed a bunch of glass beads, used it to buy everything in the African nation, enslaved everybody in Africa, owned everything, and impoverished everyone that stayed on the glass bead standard. So, is the gold standard working in Turkey? No. If it was working, the lira wouldn't be crashing, right? Is the gold standard working in China? No, they're not on the gold standard. The CNY is weak. How do you know it's weak? Because they have capital controls. If they drop the capital controls, everybody would take their money out of the CNY and the CNY would crash. So, it's not really a question of worrying about Bitcoin. You ought to worry about everything else. If you have any money in anything other than Bitcoin, you should be worrying that someone's going to get rational and start to short or sell that asset you're holding as a store of value. And they're going to start to buy Bitcoin with it, because when that happens, gold goes from $11 trillion market cap to $2 trillion market cap. Bitcoin goes from $500 billion market cap to $5 trillion market cap. Right? By the way, I just laid this out for a nation. The same thing works for a company. Like my company's stock was, $120 a share. We had $250 million of assets. We bought Bitcoin with it. Today, the stock is quadrupled almost, and we have $4.25 billion of assets. Our assets are up by a factor of 20. You know, we've made billions of dollars for our shareholders. Our stock is up 150%, which outperforms Apple, Amazon, Facebook, Google, every one of the big tech companies, every asset class. So what do you fear? If we bought gold, gold would have been down 4%. If we had bought gold, we would have $220 million of gold right now instead of $4.2 billion worth of Bitcoin right now. That's what you fear. So the big idea is you can be on a Bitcoin standard. Your company can be on a Bitcoin standard. Your country can be on a Bitcoin standard. You don't have the option to not be on a Bitcoin standard. The decision to not be on a Bitcoin standard is the decision to be on a gold standard, or an Airbnb apartment standard, or an S&P standard, or a silver standard, or a bond standard, or you want to be on the peso standard. The peso's gone from 1 peso to the dollar to 485 pesos to the dollar in 20 years. That's losing 99.8% of your wealth in 20 years. Against the dollar, the dollar's lost 75% of its wealth in the same time frame against scarce assets. So you want to be on a peso standard, you're going to lose 99.95% of your wealth in 20 years. So the fear really is somebody does it to you, right? A good idea is an idea that you wouldn't want your competitor to pursue to your detriment. So I'm beyond the fearing of Bitcoin. I think we're past the event horizon. It's pretty clear it's winning. It's been accepted. It's accepted in China. The Chinese acknowledge it as a digital asset. If the Chinese, the Europeans, the Middle Easterners, the Singaporeans, the Africans, the South Americans, the North Americans all acknowledge Bitcoin, what am I worried about? Really, your worries are all about your own business, your own family, your own country, your own city. You can execute poorly. You can take your Bitcoin and put it with BlockFi or Celsius or FTX and have the counterparty fail. You can worry about that. I guess I would say I worry about counterparties, right? We all worry about all the counterparties we deal with and who do you trust? And you should always, you get a hardware wallet, does it have a hole in it? When people send me a hardware wallet, they're like, this is just for you. I'm giving it to you for free. I'm like, oh, yeah, I'm not using this one, right? Right? So there are things to worry about, but they're common sense things to worry about, as opposed to Bitcoin itself. The whole principle of Bitcoin is we've created an asset on a network to eliminate counterparty risk in the asset and counterparty risk in the network. When you actually own a commodity, you have counterparty risk to the other commodity manufacturers and the physical jurisdictions you custody the commodity in. And when you have a commodity you can't self-custody, then you have counterparty risk to the custodian. And that gets your gold seized, or that gets your oil embargoed, or whatever. So Bitcoin is all about eliminating counterparty risk. So I think probably just don't F it up, right? Don't try to fix it, right? Don't try to fix Bitcoin like that. You wonder why the Bitcoin maxi is so hostile to people with their ideas. Like we just want to double the block size, or we want to change this rule or that rule. They're hostile to that because it's already perfect, and it's a bunch of imperfect people with a large ego that think that they can improve it, and they want to basically F it up. So I would probably be a bit worried about that if there was any threat, but Bitcoin, I think, is stabilized. The protocol is stabilized. The community is very committed to the current conservative principles of Bitcoin. So I don't see that as a threat. I think now we're just in an expansion adoption stage. And as William Gibson said, the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed.